Hey, everyone. As always, thank you for tuning in to another edition of the Reeves Reflection. I am Tony Reeves. Let's get to work. I want to reflect on what it meant for me to go through my educational opportunity to get a scholarship under ROTC conditions. I am a big proponent of it, and here's the hard part that parents sometimes don't understand, is that a lot of times parents want to let their children make certain decisions as they get a particular age, whether it be 16, 17 years old. But I'm going to be the first to tell you that while they're in the process of making those decisions, it is extremely important. Let me stress again, extremely important that you are proactive in giving guidance to help to make the best decisions. I'm going to say this in the nicest way, but it's going to come off sounding a little harsh. I didn't really get that. And it's not because my mom didn't want to help me. It was that my mom was guided by her own experiences. My mother was in a position where she spent 3 years at her dream school and then came back and something funky happened that was beyond her control. And as a result, she had to spend her final year at the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff. And so she was kind of bitter. I hate to say bitter. She really was, well, actually, she'll say it. She was a little bitter because where her brothers all got a chance to go to the school of their choice, and in 3 of those, of her 5 brothers, I think out of all of her brothers, 3 of them got a chance to graduate from the school of their choice. She didn't. And so for me, she did not want to stand in the way of my opportunities to go to where I wanted to go. And that I love her for and respect her for. But the harsh reality is that there were some decisions that I made during that time period that I probably could have used some guidance. Now, for those of you who are saying, you have some regrets? No. In retrospect, I'm happy with the decisions that I make. It got me to where I am today. But in hindsight, looking at it, I probably could have benefited from some guidance from a long-term standpoint. And you're saying, well, what do you mean? Well, back in the day, I was trying to get a scholarship. If I remember correctly, it was like Army. I think I was trying to go for Army ROTC and the Air Force. It was a weird type of dynamic where I think the service academy, the ROTC for all the militaries, the process was the same if you can just designate which ones you want to go to. And I think I was trying to go the Army ROTC route. So in order for me to go through that route, I had to do 3 things. I had to submit an application. I had to take a kind of a brief PT test, physical training test that required me to do certain things, and then I had to interview. Now, for my benefit, I had a few things to my advantage. One, I wouldn't say a great GPA, but it was a decent GPA. I was like 3.6. 2, from a physical training standpoint, I was taking Taekwondo at the time, and I had been through basic training for the Army, so I was in pretty good shape. And then the interview portion, oddly enough, wasn't that bad for me, mainly because I had been in a lot of leadership positions in church, so I was in positions where I had to speak on a regular basis. I say all that to say is that going into the process, I wasn't much at a disadvantage. So here's the situation where I go in, and fortunately for me, in my hometown, there is a historically black college university, the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff. And so everything I had to go through there. So that meant there was an Army ROTC program there. The commander of that program was a lieutenant colonel, and he was responsible for administering the physical training test, which was basically us running and doing some push-ups and running sit-ups and stuff like that. And then he also did the interview portion as well. And so I'm in a situation where I'm like, cool, this is going to be the bomb. And so I'm in a situation where I basically go there for the day. It's only about, I'm only there for half a day. So they're reviewing, and it's a panelist. He's not by himself. He's literally looking at this with 2 other individuals. And so I go through the interview process. After that, I do the test. And so after that, I basically have to wait for the results. And the results basically tells me if I will be awarded an Army ROTC scholarship or if I'm not going to be awarded one. So I remember this was the fascinating part. So afterwards, he grabs my arm and pulls me to the side. And he's like, young man, let me kind of lay something out to you. You realize you have two tracks here. And I'm like, I don't understand. He said, there's what we call the Quality Enrichment Program track, and then we have the nationwide track. And I was like, of course, I didn't understand what that meant. The Quality Enrichment Program track, I don't know if they still have it, is literally basically if you are planning on going to Army ROTC to just historically black colleges and universities. The nationwide track is for all universities. And so he tells me, this is literally, I still remember this, mind blows me. He literally turns and tells me, looking at your scores, looking at your interview and your application and your test scores, you are almost a shoo-in for the QEP. I said, okay. He said, but I'm going to tell you, on the nationwide, the competition is a lot fiercer. I said, okay. So what does that mean for me? And this is what he said. He said, what does this mean for you? This is what it means for you. Right now, you've asked to be considered on the nationwide track, which is what most people do, and most, especially people who are Asian, Latino, white, and so forth like that. That means you're competing against them. If you go to the QEP, you're only competing against individuals who are applying to get into quality enrichment program schools. And he said, I can tell you, because I have been on the board that approves these scholarships, that your scores, your test scores, your interview makes you not only competitive, I can guarantee you'll get an Army ROTC scholarship to any HBCU in the country. And mind you, keep in mind, at this particular point, I have a family legacy of people who've gone to HBCUs. And so he paused and he told me, he says, let me just be clear. If you were to go if you were to go QEP and you were to stay here in Pine Bluff, I guarantee you that you would have a full ride, because under the Army scholarships, it only pays for tuition. But some schools, if you get a full military scholarship, they'll throw in room and board. So it effectively becomes a full scholarship. And I remember him telling me, if you stay here, it'll be a full ride. But he said, I can also tell you that if you have certain schools in mind, if you tell me the school, I can tell you if they have that provision as well. I can guarantee you that you will get into an HBCU, you will get a scholarship to an HBCU. And it was fascinating because at the time, I had a couple of schools that I did have on my list. I had Howard on my list because my uncle went to Howard. Alcorn State University was on my list because they had actually started recruiting me, and I was like interested in them. I actually was thinking about Grambling, and UAPB was last because I wasn't trying to stay home. But it was fascinating because I didn't understand what that would mean. And so, unfortunately, because of the fact that I was a little bit, had a low self-esteem, was very insecure, I didn't take what he was telling me as here's a way for you to go through college without having any debt. The military will pay for you, and this is a fast track if you're interested in going into the military afterwards. I didn't think about that at all. All I kept thinking was, when I heard him, is that he was telling me that I wasn't good enough to get a nationwide scholarship. And that was not what he was saying. So I said, nope, I'm going to stay on the nationwide track. And he kept saying to me, he said, are you sure? Because I'm telling you, you're competitive, but the competition, you're dealing with people who have perfect GPAs, valedictorian, salutatorian, and for me, I was in the top 12% of my class, but I wasn't like in the top 10 students and so forth, or top 10%. So I elected to not go that route. Unfortunately, I did not get a scholarship, a 4-year scholarship. And so when I went to college, I went there basically I went to a predominantly white institution, University of Tampa, and I ended up funding all of that out of my initial pocket. I mean, I was doing student loans that first year. Second year, I became an RA. And as a result of becoming an RA, I got an additional stipend that took care of room and board. I got college work study. And then halfway through my sophomore year, I was awarded a 2.5-year scholarship from the Army ROTC unit, because I was taking ROTC at the time. And then what ended up happening was ROTC paid for the second half of my sophomore year, all of my junior, all of my senior year, and the University of Tampa threw in room and board. Now, you would probably say to yourself, well, you ended up getting the scholarship anyway. I said, you're right. But the reality is that in retrospect, I didn't realize how important it was, because it wasn't until I got into position and realized that, I don't have to worry about paying for anything anymore, that had I thought about it from that standpoint when I first came to school, or when I was first applying to go to school, then it would have made more sense to me. So why am I sharing this with you? So many times what happens, you've got to remember, when young people are trying to make these life-altering decisions, this is all new and uncharted territory for them. I was more caught up in my feelings and my attitudes as opposed to what the pragmatic impact of me going a particular route that this colonel was telling me. Does it mean that if I would have taken it, I would have gone to school and had the life that I have now? No way of knowing that. Do I regret that didn't happen? No, I do not. But what I'm saying is that when you find yourself talking to young people who are in these pivotal, early, life-altering decision-making years where they've never had really any hardcore life experience, take the time to educate them as to what they're doing, so this way they can make a more informed decision. This gentleman tried his best to do so with me, and I'll always be grateful for it. But in hindsight, with a little bit more information, my decision making might have been different. Again, I say, I have no regrets about the decisions that I made, and I'm glad that I made the decisions that I did. But if I could do this all over again for someone else besides me, I would take the time to educate them and give them as much information as possible so that they can understand the decision that may have an impact on them in the long run. All right, everyone, you know what time it is. It is the end of our time here. Thank you very much for tuning in to another edition of the Reeves Reflection. And as always, I have to end with my favorite question of the day. Are you ready for the Anthony Reeves experience?